short presentation, and then obviously answer any questions that anybody's got. I mean, obviously Rob's led us in very nicely and answered quite a lot of the questions, which is really good. So that was a great presentation, Rob. I think obviously I mentioned in my introduction that one of the networks that we're involved with is IoT Scotland. And IoT Scotland is a Scottish government-backed project to deploy LoRaWAN throughout the major towns, cities, and some rural areas in Scotland. So if I just share my screen now.
Yeah, if everyone could turn off their mics and their cameras while Alasdair, James, and potentially Jamie get involved, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
So can everybody see that? Okay, yeah.
I can see it. Great. Excellent.
Yep. So thanks very much. So very short presentation on IoT Scotland, what we're doing with East Ayrshire Council, and in general what we've been doing with the Internet of Things. As I said, I think it'll segue well into what Rob's been talking about. There's quite a bit of overlap there, but if it's food for thought in terms of what the Internet of Things can do for you, then hopefully that'll be benefit. First of all, North are a relatively new company with a long heritage. So last year we were pulled together from 5 different companies. 2 major companies within that were Pinnacle Solutions, of which I was part of, and Boston Networks up in Glasgow. So together we've got over 40 years of experience. We're basically focused on communications and networking, safety and security, so CCTV, fire alarm, access control, and also the Internet of Things. IoT Scotland, as I said, is the largest LoRaWAN project that we're currently working on, deploying LoRaWAN throughout the major towns and cities in Scotland. It's a joint project with the Scottish Government, so part funded by the Scottish Government, part funded by ourselves. It's an open network, so we're rolling this network out and it's available to anybody on a commercial basis. We're working with all local councils to deploy the gateways on their buildings. There's no cost to the councils for us for doing this. So we're partnering local councils, housing associations, and other organisations with suitable buildings available. And what the Internet of Things, as we've been talking about, it opens up new opportunities and capabilities for councils, local businesses to take advantage of. We've heard that LoRaWAN's a low power wide area network technology. The picture there shows you the size of the gateway, so it's like a shoebox sort of size, with an antenna. The antenna we use is 1 meter long, so very unobtrusive. It has mobile data backhaul, so you don't need to connect it into your networks as such, so there's no security issues there. And all we need is mains power, and it's about 15 watts consumption, so very low power, very low cost for running that gateway. In terms of health considerations, so we're deploying these on schools and other buildings. If you compare the power transmitted by a LoRaWAN gateway, it's about 8 times lower than your typical Wi-Fi access point at home, and about 40 times lower than your mobile phone. So it's a very low power. It's running at 868 megahertz. So there is no health-related concerns around the LoRaWAN network. It's actually 100,000 times lower than the mobile base station that sometimes you see up on top of buildings. Importantly, IoT Scotland's not a telecom operator, and we don't hold code powers. LoRaWAN is an unlicensed technology, which means that anybody can buy and deploy a LoRaWAN gateway. We're just obviously doing this at scale and opening it up for third parties to use to deliver IoT solutions on the back of. Importantly as well, planning permission is not required for the installation of the gateways. They fall under the GPD, or General Permitted Development, part of planning permission. In terms of what we're doing in Scotland, and specifically in East Ayrshire. So Scotland, we've engaged with all 32 councils, and we've done surveys across most of those to date. We're probably rolled out in around half of the councils within Scotland. And obviously, during the year that we've had, there have been some challenges and delays. Some councils it's not been a challenge. They've opened up their buildings and let us come and install the solutions, because there's nobody in those and there's nobody working. Other ones have been a little bit more cautious, but in general, we're still carrying on as normal, doing the surveys and getting the gateways installed. As you can see here, this is the coverage we've got in East Ayrshire. So we've still got a few more gateways to deploy around Kilmarnock. This is North Ayrshire over to the left, so I'm not showing any coverage that we've got here, purely showing what we have currently in East Ayrshire. And this is the actual coverage that you get depends on the topography of the land. So typically, you would always want to deploy a gateway as high as possible. So if there is a block of flats, you'll put it on the top of the block of flats. If there is a hillside, then you will choose to put it up on top of that hillside, and therefore you can actually extend the coverage down across the area. LoRaWAN isn't magic. It's a bit like your mobile phone signal. If there are buildings or are hills in the way, the signal will be degraded and not get through. But we've actually got examples of deploying this in towns and cities as we've got here. We're also in discussions with Cairngorm National Park and Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park. Again, the terrain around those areas is quite challenging, but there are solutions and benefits for deploying LoRaWAN within those rural areas as well. With regards to the Internet of Things, Nick, the Internet of Things is nothing new. It's basically telemetry, which has been around for a long while. The thing that makes it different, one is the name, IoT. It's a buzzword and it's fresh in here now. But actually, one of the other differences is the range of low power wide area network technologies that are now available. So LoRaWAN is one of those. It is open, and it's important to stress about it being open. What that means is lots of companies can develop sensors that work on a LoRaWAN network, and they will then or should then work on anybody else's LoRaWAN network that's available there. Another alternative is Sigfox. That is a private company, and that's rolled out, more prevalent in Europe, although there is significant coverage in the UK as well. And coming up at the rear, we've got the mobile network operators offering their narrowband IoT or LTE. Generally, Vodafone is doing narrowband IoT, although EE are also starting to offer that, and O2 are doing LTE. Both of those technologies are not really there yet in terms of coverage, and they're not as good on sensor battery life as LoRaWAN or Sigfox. There's a wide range of sensors available. As I said, because it's an open standard, we're getting lots of startups developing and designing sensors, which is a good and a bad thing. It's good that you've got lots of choice and opportunity for sensors you can use. It's bad because quite often they won't deliver what they actually say on the box. So you have to pick through it and select sensor manufacturers that you can trust. Some of the larger players are now also deploying LoRaWAN enabled sensors, but sometimes they're a bit behind the small startups. Battery technologies, as Rob said, we're looking at 5 years as probably the minimum that you should look for, ranging up to 10 years plus. Typically, those sensors will be powering up every 15 minutes, half an hour or an hour, measuring what they're meant to measure, transmitting it, and then going back into a deep sleep. So you wouldn't want a sensor that lasted for 6 months or a year if you were deploying hundreds of thousands of these. So it's quite important that they last for 5-10 years plus. And all of this coming together enables a corny phrase that Cisco, I think, coined, the art of the possible. But that's exactly what it is. Somebody selling you an IoT solution shouldn't be pushing technology at you. You need to understand what the problem is, what it is that you want to solve. What is it that if you got this extra data would make you do something that you couldn't do before, or do it more efficiently, or do it cheaper? So it's always start with the problem, not the technology. This is probably a slide that you've seen before. As I said, you should start here. What is the specific actionable problem or question that you'd like to solve or answer? And then look at how it would be different if you could do it. And then leading through into looking at how technology can actually deliver that for you. So it's very important that, you know, if somebody's coming up and pushing sensors in your face and telling you that actually this is the solution you want, go back and ask the question about what is the specific problem that you're looking to address, and then apply technology for it. We talked a little bit earlier about what LoRaWAN is. So it's an open standard technology, which is important. It's very low bandwidth, so you're not going to make a phone call over it, connect to the internet, or send video. So you're talking about 250 bits per second up to 11 kilobits per second. It's even slower than the old modems that used to connect to the internet, if anybody's old enough to remember those. Distance covered, it can be up to 15 kilometers or further line of sight. But obviously, if you're in an urban environment and the signal has to go through buildings or through obstructions, then that can be a lot less. Typically, we're seeing if you get good building coverage within an urban environment, you can get a kilometer or two from a gateway. And it has got full end-to-end security. So with LoRaWAN, you configure some keys, security keys on that sensor, and it encrypts the data with 128-bit encryption keys. Actually does it twice, so it encrypts the data payload, makes a LoRaWAN packet, encrypts that, and then sends it across the network. So actually it's fully encrypted when it pops out at your application servers at the other end. A couple of slides just to go through some of the solutions that we've developed and we've delivered to customers. We develop our own end solutions, but we also integrate third-party solutions that other providers have already developed. One of the solutions we've done, we've got a lot of customers that want to deploy solutions and find out what IoT can deliver. So what we did to help that is we've developed our own IoT platform that basically, in the first instance, acts as what we call a data enablement platform. So this allows you to deploy your sensors. We will gather the data back over the LoRaWAN network. We will decode that sensor data and we will store it in a time-based database. We then make that data available to you or your third-party data analytics platforms to pull the data out through our API and process it and make decisions based on that. So that's becoming very popular where you already have an existing system and you don't want another screen or another application to deal with. So we will identify sensors, deploy them, pull that data in, store it, and make it securely available through an API to your existing systems. What we've then done with the platform for clients that actually have specific applications that they want us to develop, we can actually develop applications on top of that platform. And it actually simplifies the application development because we have that core platform in place. Some of the current applications that we've developed, we've got air quality monitoring for inside a building or external. We have a social housing solution for damp and mold. There's quite a lot of companies out there now offering these solutions where you can monitor temperature and humidity and work out if the conditions inside a house is conducive to damp and mold. Waste management, flood monitoring in gullies and rivers and burns, and also smart buildings. So we've got a project later on I'll talk about where we're deploying sensors to provide additional data insight into buildings to allow a council to reduce their energy costs and also reduce their carbon footprint. Here's an example of the air quality solution. So air quality is an interesting one because it's not going to fix the problem. It's not going to solve the solution. Typically air quality outside at the moment, we have a fixed high cost air quality station within towns or cities. What we believe IoT is going to help do is deliver more low cost sensors throughout the town or city to get better granular data. And you can build up the pattern for where the air quality, bad air quality or poor air quality is coming in, what time of the day, what time of year. So we've actually got a range of third-party sensors that we've tested and are happy with, and an application that will allow us to deploy those and give that data to existing clients. Social housing is an interesting one, as I said. Probably about 90% of problems with damp and mold within social housing are caused by the tenants. Maybe 10% are caused by issues with the property. what we've actually got is an end-to-end solution where we will carry out a house moisture MOT, moisture and ventilation. So we just check to see if there's anything wrong with the property, issue a report, and that works will then get fixed. We then will deploy sensors into the property to monitor temperature and humidity primarily, and that will identify any conditions where the damp and mold is potentially going to be a problem. That then allows the social housing landlord to focus on and educate the tenant on what they should and shouldn't be doing within that property, and hopefully bring the conditions down such that you know, it's not going to cause a problem to the fabric of the house and the health of the tenant. Equally, there's going to be a small number of tenants that, even if you do educate them and tell them what they should and shouldn't be doing, will just ignore that. And what the housing association have then got is evidence to show that actually the conditions within the property is not down to the landlord, it's down to the tenant. And that's quite important, as there's some new legislation that actually was delayed because of COVID that is going to get rolled out, which is fitness for habitation, where the landlord will actually get fined heavily if the conditions in the property are not up to standards. And there's a bit of a perverse thing there where actually the conditions in the property is down to what the tenant is doing, but actually the landlord is going to get penalised and fined for that. So having a detailed system like this allows the landlord to identify where there are issues and to help resolve them where available. Waste management is one that we've, again, has been talked about earlier and is very useful and interesting. You obviously put a bin sensor into the bins to measure the level within them of waste, and then you can actually use that to work out which route you should take for emptying the bins, work out which bins don't need to be picked up on the regular once a week route or once a day route. Equally, we've deployed it with councils where they may have a block of flats that have 3 bins that are used. From the measurements taken, they realise that they can pull one of those back, so 2 is more than adequate. We've had other examples where in the city centre, the residents have been complaining that the bins haven't been emptied. And using the sensors, what we actually were able to find out is half an hour after they were emptied, the local shops around those residents were emptying their waste into the bin and filling it right up. So it gave that sort of insight that allowed the council to take some action and resolve that problem. Flood monitoring was mentioned. Again, we can do flood monitoring on streams, rivers, and also gullies. We can also deploy rain gauges, so you can actually work out the rainfall and compare that with the water levels. So again, we're working with various councils on this. And also, it's very important here again, with flood monitoring, there's some skills and knowledge in terms of flood terrain, which we don't have. So we quite often are working with third-party flood consultants as well with the clients that we've got. A couple of specific projects where we've rolled these solutions out and they're delivering benefits. The Highland Council has probably got one of the largest areas in the UK where they've got several thousand buildings covering that. And it's quite difficult for their team to get around and monitor and react to any issues within the buildings. Only the larger buildings have any form of building management system or BMS. So what we've done is we've rolled out a range of sensors over IoT Scotland to provide an insight into the buildings that don't have BMS, but also to provide a richer set of data to the larger buildings that do have BMS. The sensors that have gone in there have been measuring energy usage, so electricity, gas, water, also measuring temperature, humidity, PIR movement, so you can work out when the building's used during the day and during the week. You can then check if the central heating system has been programmed accordingly to when the building's used. So it gives them a lot of insight into how that building is run and how they can adjust things. It also allows them to react to any complaints from the public or employees that are in those buildings. So we've actually delivered the sensors the LoRaWAN network and our data enablement platform there. And the Highland Council are working with a third-party company that have a data analysis tool. So we're just providing that rich set of data for them to use on their existing platforms. And that's been very successful, and we're looking to move to the next stage with the Highland Council on that one. Intelligent street lighting. So a question earlier was, what do you think is the sort of de facto IoT solution? Now, it's only relevant if you haven't upgraded your street lights to LEDs, or if you haven't already selected another technology for intelligent street lighting. But if you think about it, your street lights cover the complete city or town area. So by putting a network in place to provide street lighting, intelligent street lighting, you've got a network that covers your town or city. And there you can then easily roll out waste management, flood monitoring, social care, IoT solutions, because the network is there and the coverage is there. We've rolled out intelligent street lighting within Aberdeen. They've got a total of 35,000 lights. We've deployed 17 gateways around Aberdeen City, and that provides coverage to all those lights. We're currently rolling about 20,000 of those to date, and continue to roll out. It's a complementary solution to an LED replacement program. So if you replace the old sodium lights with LEDs, you're probably going to get around 45 to 50% savings on your power and energy usage, which in Aberdeen's case is about £1 million saving a year. By putting intelligence on top of that, it allows them to get real-time billing. So they actually get real-time billing from each of the lamps. Typically what's happened is you have a spreadsheet and you know that it's a 30 or a 40 watt lamp, and that goes in a spreadsheet and works out what the bill is. If you put some intelligence on those lighting nodes, you actually get real-time consumption figures, and therefore you primarily will make an additional saving on the back of that. You can also implement dimming profiles and calendars. So for part-time 20 signals outside schools, or for dimming the lights at maybe 3 or 4 in the morning to actually, again, the light is still adequate, but you're actually making additional savings by reducing the power slightly. So we're working on that one with a company called Lucy's Odeon, so a Yorkshire-based company, and we're just in the throes of rolling the network out around Bradford to support an intelligent license solution being installed by Amy. So as I said, 17 LoRaWAN gateways. One of the other things that you can get with the solution here is it also monitors how upright the lighting columns are. Now, before getting involved with this, I didn't think lighting columns had an issue with staying upright, but actually the number of lighting columns that are in collision with cars, or cars in collisions with lighting columns, are quite a lot. Quite a lot of them aren't reported. So by getting a real-time alert that there has been a collision, if you've got a CCTV system in the area, you can actually then home in and see who was involved with that accident. But more importantly, you can then send out people to go and check that the lighting column isn't a danger and isn't going to fall over. It also removes nighttime patrols. So typically for legacy lighting systems, you would travel out at night and go around the streets and check which lights were out. Or alternatively, you waited until the public told you that some lights were out. And with an intelligent lighting system, you can actually get real-time feedback on each of the lights on whether they're working or not. And if mains power goes out for the lights, the node has the ability to have a last gasp transmission and tell you that actually I'm not working and it's due to the power failure rather than any other fault. So there's a lot more efficiency in the maintenance of the lighting system. And smart parking is another one that is of a lot of interest. You would deploy in-ground sensors to monitor parking spaces. They would typically connect over LoRaWAN, but can connect over a range of other technologies. Equally, you can deploy fixed cameras with a wide-angle lens, and they can look at a set of parking spaces and calculate which are used and which aren't. And then these tie back into systems which will give guidance to users to where spaces are free, allow them to make payment via their phones. It will provide the council with ideas of where to do any enforcement, so where people have parked and they haven't bought a ticket, or where tickets have run out. But equally, it will also provide you with that rich analytics to work out about predictions on car parks, and to look at any changes that you've made to the road management and to see what the effect has been on the parking side of things, and also to provide access to digital signage for directing people to where the parking spots are. So that's a quick overview, I think, of what the typical sorts of solutions are that we've developed and deployed. I think, as I said, the main thing to take away from this is LoRaWAN is an open access network. Anybody offering you LoRaWAN, it should be open and allow you to use whoever's solution on that. And always think about what is the challenge you're trying to overcome. And any good IoT partner will then work with you to identify a solution that they can either deliver or they'll point you to somebody who can. Thank you.
Thank you, Alasdair. Again, more information, and the possibilities seem endless, to be honest, don't they? I mean, this is the interesting thing. It's almost a case of you've almost got not too much choice, but there's plenty of choice around networks, potential networks, sensors, how deep you want to start, how deep you want the data to go, and that sort of thing. James McKee at East Ayrshire. I know what if I may, before I prompt questions, but can you just give me a quick can you give everyone a little bit of awareness as to what you guys in East Ayrshire are doing? Because obviously I spotted you on another type of activity, and you made the mistake of saying we're doing some Internet of Things stuff, and I press ganged you into turning up here. So it'd be churlish of me not to make you at least give us a little bit of insight into what East Ayrshire are doing with Internet of Things. Would that be okay?
Of course it is, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so it's thanks, Nick, for press ganging, volunteering, nominating. Yeah, it's good. In all seriousness, it's good to be here, and thank you for the opportunity as well to work alongside colleagues at North, Alasdair and Jamie. So I suppose our journey started at roughly about 18 months ago. A conversation led to myself being tasked with working alongside Boston Networks at the time, as Alice mentioned, now North, and to look at how do we bring and be part of the Internet of Things Scotland project. We could see many benefits to the having that network and being part of it in East Ayrshire. As Alice has alluded to, East Ayrshire is a mix of urban and rural area, predominantly rural. So obviously that presents its own challenges in some ways. Initially, we identified roughly about 40 sites across East Ayrshire Council and sites. So this was whittled down to, I think, roughly about 26 sites, and then North, their colleagues carried out various site surveys, risk assessments, method statements, etc., that satisfied across all our services, our legal, our health and safety, etc. So it's been really seamless process. As Alasdair alluded to as well, around fears of relating to health, etc. So there were some concerns. As the IoT network, is it the same as 5G? Does it bring X concerns to, particularly within schools and to pupils? And very quickly we were able to reassure the head teachers and everyone that no, this isn't. It's long range, low powered, Wi-Fi network. It's nothing like 5G. And on average, I think it costs, correct me if I'm wrong, roughly between £15 and £20 per year to power one of these things. So, it was reassuring to them, and it allowed us to proceed with what was happening. In terms of the coverage, Alistair showed you the map. So what we're looking at is roughly between, I think, 75% and 80% coverage across East Ayrshire. Myself being a perfectionist, I wanted it closer to 95 to 100%. However, we soon discovered that the areas that weren't covered or wouldn't be covered by the network were predominantly hills, or there'd be one farm, one man and the sheep. So it wouldn't be cost effective to put a mast or deploy a gateway in those particular areas. However, what we did find was, as other councils, other local authorities are onboarded to the IoT Scotland project, there's natural bleed signal from their areas. So even though we're sitting at 75-80% just now, that could potentially increase as a result of neighbouring authorities, and likewise our signal could bleed into their authority, which is good. I suppose for the benefit side, we see there's huge benefits both for our businesses and our communities. We've already heard about, from Alasdair and others around the benefits. However, I'll speak a wee bit about the benefits for our communities in a moment, around social housing, around smart sensors, etc. What we also felt was that there could be interest in stimulating economic activity, from businesses coming to the area. So we are about 25 miles south of Glasgow. To have this as part of a sort of profile, why would a business want to come to East Ayrshire? Well, here's what it's got to offer, in terms of our rates, our rent, or we've got an IoT network in the area that you can link in through North, etc. So it builds up a nice picture. And what it also does is it stimulates that innovation and mindset and innovation culture throughout both businesses, through the council, using the smart technology and smart sensors. So what could the council use the IoT network for? And Alasdair's, I think, possibly seen my notes here, because you covered quite a lot of them, Alasdair, which is great. So we've got, we're quite prone to flooding in East Ayrshire, in some parts of East Ayrshire. So we've got flood monitor detectors, which are sensors that use onboard GSM SIM cards. So that could potentially be a use using IoT to put a sensor there when it gets to a certain level. It pings data, real-time data, to our control centre to say, be prepared, take action, etc., etc. We could also look at measuring the air quality, and you touched on that again, Alasdair. So that could potentially be outside of schools. So are there particular times of the day, drop-offs, for example, in the morning, in the afternoon, that the air quality reduces? As a result of cars, and then you could link that into active travel, walking, cycling, etc. Any projects around that. We could look at, and think it's Sweden or Norway, they use IoT as part of their smart roads infrastructure, as their ways to tell the temperature of the roads, that they can then feed back, so that it's that prevention and early intervention approach that's used. We could also look at using it for the usage of our offices, our buildings. We spoke about in terms of social housing. So when I say about the community, so what benefits to the community? Well, you could have smart street lights, you could have smart bins. Within social housing, you could look at the dampness, the moulds, etc., etc. So it's all got benefits, or could have benefits for our communities. And also we could potentially look at, I know there was a question and discussion earlier on around the use of sensor technology, etc., within our health and social care setting. I think it was yourself, Samantha. And that could be another area that we could look at, because there's already potentially sensors deployed using Wi-Fi, I think, within our health and social care. And using IoT, you could put a sensor. So if wee Jimmy gets up every night, routinely, 2 o'clock in the morning to go to the loo, and, one morning or during the night, that doesn't happen, you could use that real-time data to say, wee Jimmy's not actually got out. You could look at it for oxygen levels, etc., so that you're getting in there early rather than waiting until the next day. As I say, I'll have to caveat all that with we're very much at the start of our IoT journey. First thing is, having that partnership and working alongside, which has been fantastic with North, with Jamie and the team. But certainly excited to see what it brings, for the future. And it's just stimulating that innovation right across the sector.
I'm going to open up to questions. So I've got a quick question just to maybe get things going. So, and I guess this is to both of you, both Alasdair and James and Jamie, because obviously Jamie, you sort of with the IoT Scotland project coordinator from North. So East Ayrshire, you're getting that infrastructure and a network in place. and then obviously, you know, you've got all these different opportunities. And we've heard today with the talk about sort of the data's got to come in, but then, you know, how will you manage that data? So what systems are going to manage it? Because obviously we've identified that the data potentially comes in, but it goes to different parts of the organisation, and, you know, it might be managed in a different way and go into different systems. How does that all work?
So if I start probably, and then James can do it. So when we're running an IoT Scotland network, the data isn't ours. So we're carrying that data on behalf of our customers. Yep.
Yeah.
So if the customer has contracted with a third party that has a complete solution, all we're doing is transferring that data. We will have tagged that data to be a waste management application, for instance. So when that data comes in, we check each packet and say, yep, that is a registered sensor, and okay, that's East Ayrshire's waste management. We would then direct that down to the relevant application servers that decode and use that sensor data. So that's number one. It's not our data, and we will pass that on. If it's us and our application that's being provided for the customer, we do the same. We take that sensor data, we pass it through the network, we check if it's a registered device or not, and then we'll pass it down to our cloud servers. And at that point, what we do is we have a dedicated instance per client. So there's no sharing of data, no chance that data can be merged between the two. And we will actually store that data into that dedicated instance, which is on Amazon Web Services, and it's secure access.
Yeah.
GDPR will have been discussed and looked at. Quite often the data is not going to be identify individuals, but it could be attached to other bits of data that could identify an individual. So again, because we are the data processor, not the data controller, we are passing that data down, and it is the customer who has secure access into and how they use that data. So that's kind of a very high level view of what we do.
Excellent, thank you very much. Right, open, sorry, I went, anybody else got any questions, please? Just unmute Nick Wells, you've unmuted yourself, and then Sam Poulton. Right, Nick, go on then.
Real, thanks, Nick. Just a couple of questions, Alasdair, if I may. I was on with Capita the other week, and they mentioned the Swan network. Is that what this is part of, or is that something separate? Just so I can understand the dynamics.
So as I said, LoRaWAN is an unlicensed network, so anybody can put these networks out. I mean, you may have heard of the Things network. So the Things network is a great initiative that basically provides it for free. So you can buy a gateway, you can put it out on the Things network, and entrepreneurs and startups can then use IoT.
Yeah, and that's how Norfolk and Suffolk are doing theirs, right?
Yeah, and I totally advocate that. Where you maybe start questioning that is if you want an SLA on the back of that, because actually there's no guaranteed SLA in place. What Capita have done is they already have the Swan network, and for anybody not in Scotland that don't know what that is, it's basically it's a network for local government to subscribe to and connect their buildings or schools to. Not all councils in Scotland have subscribed to that, but there are a number that have. And what Capita have quite rightly done is they've said, well, where we're connecting your existing schools and council buildings, we will put on the back of that a LoRaWAN network, and we will then provide a LoRaWAN service around that building and around the area. So it's very similar to IoT Scotland, but it's a lot smaller scale. The future of LoRaWAN is such that there are investigations underway now in terms of how we can do effective roaming. Because if you, as I said to you earlier, if you have an IoT sensor that's in IoT Scotland's range, but it's not registered, our gateways will still receive that packet, and we'll just look at it and we'll just throw it away. So there is work afoot to say how you could do roaming. So I may look at that and say, well, actually, this is a Swan network sensor. I'll pass that through to them, and then they'll process it. We're at the sort of early stages of that evolution, but that's the way it will go. So Capita are a similar network to ours, based around their sort of council network that they've got.
Yeah, that helps. I wasn't clear if you were part of that program or you were
one of the other things just to kind of mention is, so as you say, there's a lot of forward-thinking councils. So I think Suffolk and Norfolk have deployed county-wide networks in place. one of the changes that we're seeing is we're seeing councils wanting to deploy gateways that can have 2 radios in them. And the benefit of having 2 radios is you can have one which goes to the Things Network and supports these startups and entrepreneurs, and your second radio can be to this SLA-based LoRaWAN network service. So we've got an Orbi-wise LoRaWAN network server and a Curlink one, and that's from the 2 different companies that came together. So both are carrier class LNS services, and we're starting to work with councils now that want to put these dual radio ones in place.
Yeah.
So it ticks the box of open access and anybody can join it, and you're sharing that capability. And they've also got an SLA based one.
Yeah, that's a big piece of our strategy going forward is to have that availability of the network for local, I don't want to call them hobbyists, but or entrepreneurs or businesses that want to use the network as well for economic development reasons, etc., and digitization skills. And just another question, if I may. This one's a bit more based, I think, maybe for James and the guys at Ayrshire. Is you mentioned lots and lots of sensors, different use cases, etc. And I think it comes back to what Rob was saying before. You get all of this data, but then are you experiencing that the difficulty is then now you're surfacing all this data? It's how operationally do you handle this sudden influx of data and getting the value from it? Have you got any insight into that at all?
So what I would say is that in my discussion, it was what could we use it for in East Ayrshire Council or at East Ayrshire Council. We've not actually deployed any of those through the IoT network. So, in terms of we're not receiving any data at all because we don't have any sensors through the IoT Scotland. It's just those were examples of where we could potentially deploy sensor technology linking into the IoT network. So no, unfortunately, we don't have the data. As I said, we're right at the start of our journey in terms of IoT, looking at it and looking where we could potentially deploy things.
Hi, James. That's helpful. But Alasdair, have you got anything?
Yeah, no. So from experience, we've had a lot of people think one pane of glass is the way forward, but actually, I'm not really sure whether that's actually the right way to do it. The philosophy we've got is if a customer's already got an application or a data analytics platform or something that's already providing them with that service, and if they've invested in it, why have a separate one that they're going to have to look onto? So we very much are about providing an API that's very open and that they can pull that data into. So that's number one that's come about, because when we started this, we thought we would write a nice application that gives them map and location, but if it doesn't give them anything and it just means that they have to switch between platforms, what's the benefit? So that's kind of primarily where we found it. It's what is it that the customer is trying to do? Now, on the flip side, there are some areas where we've innovated. So our social housing, we talked about the MOT and then deploying sensors. So that wasn't available. So what we've done is we have combined that 2 elements of the solution together. The data is still available via an API, but it actually provides a richer insight. So for some of our customers, they like that. So I think it's mix and match.
Excellent. Sam, do you want to ask your question?
Thanks, Nick. Actually, I've got kind of two
questions.
If that's all right. So first of all, for those that have kind of, really deployed IoT kind of in anger, have you found it quite difficult initially to identify the tangible financial benefits? Because I would imagine that sometimes it's not until you maybe run a proof of concept or you kind of dip your toes in the water that some of the benefits really start to show themselves.
Who's that to, Sam? Is that to Alasdair? Is that to James?
Anyone who wants to chime in, basically, open to the floor.
What we've found is social housing is a great one where the problem is there, but actually really, and I won't name any names here, but most councils or housing associations know they have a problem, And actually, if they say, well, if we deploy the sensors, we'll now know we have a problem and we'll have to do something around it. So therefore, their attitude is, I don't really want to do it. You know, so yeah, there's different approaches.
I mean, a lot of the projects, you know, the IoT, you know, deployments have been around achieving savings, for example.
Yep.
But at the moment, I'm struggling to wrap my head around how any organisation identifies what the savings could be until they have kind of partially deployed it. So you almost have to have that invest to save, but trying to identify what the level of savings could be.
Yeah.
Is a bit of
there's tangible and intangible ones, isn't there, as well? So intelligent lighting is a nice one, because actually, you know, and that doesn't have to be intelligent, it's just LED lighting. So there's an immediate saving. You know, as I said, Aberdeen, 32,000 lights, switching from sodium to LEDs, they save £1 million a year. Well, that's a no-brainer. Let's just do it and go ahead. The ability to put intelligence on and then save about 15%, that's getting a bit more interesting, because you're getting 15% more on power. So you've got pounds that you know you're going to save, but then you'll also save through more intelligent maintenance. They're also in Aberdeen very forward thinking. So they've got a command and control CCTV system that we've put in place. We've put the intelligent lighting in place. We've got some flood monitoring. They have a vision to share the data between them. So there's some intangible benefits there, where if there's a flooding risk, then they'll change digital signage on the road to stop people going down that way. So sometimes it's very easy to know what the savings are, other times it's not. And that's when there's a pilot or a proof of value needed. And there's a bit of a challenge there in terms of a lot of people selling solutions don't want to do pilots, because actually there's lots of pilots that are going on. And unless there's a commitment from the client, they don't typically will end up going anywhere. So, and this is why it's very important not just to take a solution because it's there and other people have used it. It's how will it benefit you and how will you make that change? Because it may not be pounds and shillings that you're going to save. It may be that your service is improved vastly, or you've freed up some of your people so they can do something else which they've never been able to do within the service. And that's intangible, isn't it? That's so it does need to be driven by, you know, an evangelist within the organization of what they see they can do. And with government, there are lots of silos. So breaking the silos or sharing the silos is another challenge. We're doing lots of presentations to councils at the moment, talking about what's possible, because what you want to do is spark the people at the coalface that know what the challenges are to then go, so you mean we could do this and then make some savings? So, you know, I don't know if that's answered.
James, do you want to come in? And then Andrew, James first, and then Andrew. I'm sure you've got maybe some things about return on investment and business cases for us. Go on, James.
Yeah, I think, Alasdair, you know, you hit the nail on the head right during your presentation around, you want to start off with what's the challenge, what's the problem, rather than going straight to the solution of this is the technology will do this. If you start off with the problem, but even before you have that, you know, that proof of concept, etc., understand where the technology can then support that, enable it, etc. And as Alasdair said, that would then free up, or could potentially free up resources, staff, and it's got both tangible and intangible, you know, benefits to it. I think also it's for me, it's important to understand use cases, you know, case studies of where things of you know, took place, etc. And as Alasdair promoted in the presentation, various examples, whether it's Highland Council, whether it's Glasgow City Council, etc., of examples where IoT has been deployed. I think even when you, as Alasdair again said, you know, within local government, if there is silo working, for me, I can see IoT touching possibly every service within a local government, within councils. You know, whether it's from social housing, so you've got your housing, whether it's from council building, so you've got your facilities side of it. You know, whether you're through to your outdoor services, your grounds maintenance, your waste. You know, it can touch almost every frontline service. But it's understanding, okay, what are those tangible, intangible benefits? What will they free up? Will as a result of having sensors in a building that says usage, does that mean that you can then free up a resource so they don't have to go in, put the lights on, close it down, etc.? The sensor, the data, the real-time data going back and forward should be able to tell you that if it's been used. So yeah, there's different ways to look at it.
Brilliant, thanks, James. Andrew?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I completely agree with James. I think focus on the problem. The problem is the key, but you do need to show and tell. So at the moment, I can tell you with the 5 London boroughs, I've got 2 London boroughs deploying traffic monitoring insights and social distancing. We've got 2 others about to join in, and I've probably got the 5th one to follow. What they've all benefited from, though, is seeing, if you see what I mean. So I've got my live data on my other screen for Kingston. And the other day, for example, we had a councillor make a statement about a certain area has X motorbikes go through it, delivery drivers, basically. And I kind of went back, because we're only still just settling the systems in, but I went back and went, we've had 5 and 6 hours context. Yeah. And it's not, it's not me being flippant or anything. It's just a fact. If you see what I mean, the camera says X, the answer is that. So that, I think, is very useful. And I think it's then the sort of data that empowers people. What I would say, and I can speak more clearly on it in terms of exposure in the Northeast, if you can get the right sensors in people's homes, the power of the data is phenomenal. Suddenly the resident gains a voice. It is not that they are spoken on behalf of, if you see what I mean. They need someone to get them dressed. They need X meals. I've got numerous examples I can talk about really well, where actually the carers turn up at 9 a.m. to dress the person and feed the person. But the sensors say they got up at 7:30. They've done all that. They've cooked a breakfast at 8:15. There's not a problem. What they wanted was someone to talk to. And actually then it's a different solution. We also have an app that allows carers and loved ones to effectively see front doors are closed. The resident is in bed. Going back to, I think someone mentioned it, we politely had sensors in bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchen and lounge. And we were looking at percentage of times in those rooms. And again, linked to water intake and other things. And we could see in mid-November, residents' behaviours changing. They were staying probably 60% of the day normally in their lounge, with 60% of the day in the bedroom. So we were like, they're getting cold. They might not be willing to talk about it. Let's get the right team involved. And only last week in a new deployment, that's 2 weeks old in Sutton, we've got 6 out of 80 residents that are showing signs of fuel poverty. Temperature is 6 degrees consistently in their properties, and it was -3 on that particular time outside, if you see what I mean. And all the other comparable residents in the same block are at 18 to 24, basically. So you can start to see that you've got issues. And I would say, think of your problems, but almost try and wangle the small things that are hooks to get something else in. I'm talking to teams at the moment. We've got a program in the southwest, scrap it. Fly tipping's gone up recently, probably got it in similar other authorities. We're trying to just put literally cameras in for 3 months at a time, linked to all the promotions, hotspot, deal with it, get evidence for enforcement, and then they'll move.
Oh, your sound's dropped.
Andrew, we've lost your sound.
Lost your sound, Andrew. We lost your sound.
We can see you moving.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Oh, back again. The power of
oh, there you are, yeah.
So yeah, I was just finally just saying, get as many directorates involved as you can. You'll be surprised at the ideas that come out. And only last week there was one that came out. I had it in the Northeast, but we've got it particularly in South London. Modern slavery. So properties that are taken over overnight, a vulnerable person will have probably 6 or 8 people sleep there, potentially working at the car washes people use, and things like that. There, we're doing simple carbon dioxide sensors in vulnerable people's properties. Every property has a baseline carbon dioxide level. If it changes dramatically late at night and changes through till say 5 or 6 in the morning, you can probably be aware that person is being exploited or potentially worse. So very simple things like that can make a real difference. And you will almost certainly within your team, somebody will say, I really wish I could do something about this. I think that resident's vulnerable. Yeah. Well, but basically about £15 a month you could get fax. So anyway,
brilliant. And from your perspective, you know, because obviously it sounds like, James, you've obviously got involved. There's a nationwide project, an Internet of Things project. So what you've done is you've joined in that project. You've got the infrastructure in place, and now you're thinking about. I mean, are you putting together an Internet of Things strategy for the council, or is it a case of, you know, different services will come at different times? And have you had to make an upfront investment? So you've invested in the asset, and then you're going to go out to the organisation and say, we've invested in an asset, now we need to make use of that asset.
So we're in the process of developing or refreshing our digital strategy, and emerging our new technology will obviously be part of the digital strategy going forward. You know, we don't have, we've not exactly looked at, but I came into post in 2018. Now my background is not digital, not IT, it's communities and housing. However, I immediately saw the benefits of using IoT. I first heard about IoT in 2018. You know, and when you hear about it, you read about it, you speak to people. It was a conference in Edinburgh that I attended, and I thought, we actually have IoT, you know, within the council, but we just don't call it IoT, because there are things connected to the internet that, you know, send data back and forward. The river monitor's been an example within parts of it. So we don't have a budget or an investment plan just now for IoT. It's something that will feed into our digital strategy under the, you know, emerging technologies, etc. And then we can look at it from there, from a, you know, project by project basis.
Excellent, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or thoughts or observations? Or Sam, Samantha, you've got you, Sam. Sorry, you are Samantha on your thing. You know, I'm very lazy today. Samantha, you put your camera on as soon as I said, "Is anyone more on the insight?" So you obviously have or a question. Which one is it? And make it.
A kind of question / comment. I think we mentioned about, you know, kind of silos, not only within an organisation, but particularly from my perspective, where we're working with multiple organisations across the county, like all our borough and districts and, you know, blue lights and so on. One of our concerns is that, you know, everyone wants to do IoT. They're all really enthusiastic about it. Everyone is probably going to be collecting data, but if we're not careful, we're just going to replicate that kind of silo mentality, but just within the data as opposed to within organisational structures.
Right. Yeah.
But for me, I think there's a potential that one of the biggest, most powerful things of kind of deploying IoT is establishing those interrelationships between data. So I think it was Alasdair that was saying around, you know, the kind of highways working together with like flood defences, so that, you know, they would close roads, you know, because they were getting information from the kind of the flood team that, you know, there were issues or there was likely to be issues. So one of the things that we're trying to work towards with our partners is creating a data lake across the entire partnership. But then you then have the kind of secondary problem of how do you analyze that much data potentially, and establishing those kind of interrelationships. So again, kind of open to the floor. I mean, James, I don't know how much you've been able to look at those different, you know, data sets and establish if there's actually kind of relationships between those different data sets or not. So
no, I haven't, as I say, because we've not deployed IoT sensors, devices, the technology, etc. However, what I can say is that we have a community planning partnership which brings together the police, health, college, council, etc. All our community planning partners. The review of our community plan, our 3-yearly review, is underway just now, and when talks, you know, in terms of the data element of it, it's what could be done with that data. We've just heard, you know, a moment or two ago around, I think it was Andy that said, you know, around the potential sensors in people's houses. So not only does that affect, you know, council, it could affect and it could potentially, you know, save people's lives. Because if you've got, if it links in, if it's that sensor technology that you can tell in terms of the air quality or the oxygen levels, or someone getting up, it links into the police, the ambulance, council, health and social care. You know, so it could have huge, you know, potential. But it's just understanding, you know, the risks, the benefits, opportunities, etc. that those present.
Before I bring Mr. Mike Ward in, Andrew, do you want to, because obviously you're managing a number of different London boroughs. What's your sort of perspective on this data issue?
I think what we are working together very strongly on at the moment, we are sharing the data as published by the manufacturer in their portals, okay? We are not worried about trying to collate it all together and make the greater good at the moment. What we're trying to do is get multiple use cases, multiple weather feeds and other things in, and then start to share. So we want it to be shown in whatever the manufacturer says is their preferred portfolio, you know, and then take it from there. So we are not overcomplicating it on purpose, because we just think otherwise people are going to go into rabbit holes and get completely lost. We want them to see the best traffic data. We want them to see the data about residents. Are they well? Are they not well, etc. What's happening with our floods and gullies? You know, all that stuff, and then we'll start to see if we can get a big picture.
Brilliant. Thank you. Excellent. Mike Ward, go on. What's your...
Well, I just wanted to say how fascinated I was by what Andrew was saying about taking some facts about, say, time spent in the bedroom and room temperature and deriving, you know, fuel poverty and so on. And I guess I'm just wondering what other predictions you can make from some of the data that you've got. For example, you know, if mobility begins to slow down, or then maybe dehydration becomes a problem, and you can perhaps send some care around to see if that person's okay. There's all sorts of things that I've noticed happen to people in old age as behaviour changes as a result of conditions setting in, such as just being tired, frail, dehydrated, Alzheimer's onset. You know, and is there any work that you're doing to sort of bring all that together to make sort of predictions about behaviour?
So I can only speak of the little bits I know, and yes is the answer. There are very clear correlations between water intake and when people will end up in hospital, basically. And it's 3 to 4 days. You can look at water intake and you can then say when they will hit hospital, basically. So certainly in the Northeast now, they are particularly looking at things like that. So it's fluid intakes, and they are also looking very heavily at medicine, because it's the other thing when you're doing it remotely. So they are doing controlled medicine boxes that will only open on X days, and then also say when it has been consumed. I mean, you have to slightly put a judgment call on that, because the fact that somebody has taken it out of there, they could have thrown it in the bin, but you have to reasonably assume they've taken it, if you see what I mean. So you're absolutely right. And this, it's way beyond anything I do, but I just know there are a group of people doing really good things here. And the other one that they're looking at is sensors mounted on TVs. Stating the obvious, lots of people, it's a primary room, and there are sensors that can start to detect by people's gait and the walk they do, the likelihood and probability of a fall, and also have they had a small or partial stroke or episode, I think is the official word. So you're absolutely right. This stuff is out there. What I would say is, and certainly again, if I split, so in the Northeast, uptake by residents has been far greater than down in the Southwest. We are having quite a lot of rejections. It's big brother, I don't want it. My friend cares for me. The problem we've got at the moment, and you all know it probably with friends and neighbours, you're not officially supposed to go places. So like people are, and we know they are, and they might be doing it, but also I think there's a bit of the old-fashioned mindset that sort of needs changing. And in the case of the two that I can talk about only last week, both of them had the red buttons that they could. In the case of one, she didn't want to deploy it because she was worried about disturbing someone. And the other person had left it by their bed when she unfortunately had a fall. And what I would say is some of this, it's not spying, it's not any of that stuff. This is, you know, we're just using the word monitoring. We are literally looking for signs of life. And our dashboard, if I showed it to you, is green or red. Red is potentially fuel poverty, lack of movement, or a reason that a behavioural change is deteriorating. And the last point I'd say, so the lady that actually ended up in hospital, weirdly, I was talking to the independent living officer the other day, and her flat showed movement inside it. Someone had actually gone in and was doing something. And we were like, we know she's in hospital. And so they were very quickly onto the people to check, was it somebody getting her flat ready for her return? Or was it something more sinister, if you see what I mean? So even on a very simple level, their data is really useful if you can look at it in the right context.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Mike. Rob, do you want to come in there?
I think what Andrew was saying was great. The point I was going to make has probably been passed now, but the point at your end as well, Andrew, that you make about if you can use the data in the right context, it goes back to that piece about the rejections, I suppose. It all depends on the question, doesn't it? And I guess you've seen that firsthand. We've seen it previously when we talk about these types of technologies, some of which we've deployed ourselves. If you're asking them, do you want the technology? The answer is always, well, quite often no. If the question is more rounded, knowing the individual and put across by the right person, which is, this is your health, this is where your pathway is leading to, this is what could happen, but we could help you live independently for a bit longer with some of this, it switches to a yes very quickly in our experience. So again, it's like throughout this session, it's not about the tech, it's about people. And in that instance, it's about the right question at the right time in the right way to the right person. If you can find that right way, you'll get more uptake.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. Do we have... Paul. Paul,
yeah,
you have been very quiet.
I have, for a change.
Not that I'm being rude about, because you usually have some insightful opinions. And
it's kind of you to say so. It's just a very quick question for Andrew, actually, whether there's a kind of knowledge sharing hub for the work that he's engaged in, similar to the one that we saw yesterday on web chatbots, which I thought was great and really helpful. Is there something up there that we can dive into to pick up on the insights?
So the answer is yes, we are sharing in the South London partnership, because we're trying to encourage the boroughs that are slightly behind to follow the boroughs slightly further ahead. We're specifically, because obviously we're London based, we're specifically working with Lottie. Some of you may or may not be aware of it. So any material that we have publicly available will go via Lottie or on our website. And I would also, I'd say, I think it's worth everyone having a look at Lottie. They have got some fantastic material, so it's not personally involved with me, but I've used it for other purposes. Certainly the Royal Borough of Greenwich and Brent have done an awful lot of work, and they've been very clear and sharing as well. So anyone who's wanting to nosy, have a look at that type of source, please. And Lottie is literally L-O-T-I, sorry, just to be clear.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I'll send some, I've got a few links for Lottie, Greenwich actually have just, they've got a new chief digital officer. In fact, Dave Briggs mentioned her the other day, Kit Collingwood, that used to be at DWP, and they've just released quite an interesting, groundbreaking digital strategy. But that's great, Andrew. Thanks very much.
I started watching his interview with her. It's very good, actually.
Yeah. He is good, Mr.
Well
Briggs.
worth it.
Yeah, well worth a look. All right, do we have any more? Oh, go on, Paul. Sorry.
Very quick follow-up one.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a quick follow-up one, and I don't want to get into the techie bit, because everyone's right. This is about people, and it's about finding what the problems are. But around the networking side of things, there's a lot of confusion about LoRaWAN and IoT, and they're almost used interchangeably. And we've sort of had that played out a bit in chat today as well. And Rob gave a much better answer than I did on what LoRaWAN is and why a connectivity layer is often mistaken for the entire piece, if you like. But I wanted to ask a quick question around the domestic setting and around the use of RF devices. So basically, there's an awful lot you can do with RF just by sort of attaching a smart meter to your electricity supply, for example, and then intercepting those signals to determine what's going on with the energy supply in that environment and modeling it. You can switch lights on based on a sensor, or switch smart plugs depending on a PIR picking up a signal and so on. But as I understand it, there's issues around security that have been addressed now in Ayrshire that would apply in that environment. So is it the case, this is probably more a question for Rob than anyone else on the call, now that Alasdair's gone, that you would have to stick to one of the more proprietary IoT platforms from Google or Amazon or so on in that domestic setting because of those security issues with RF?
Paul, I thought we got all the way through to the end without somebody posing a question that was really too difficult to answer. So thank you. Really
I'm sorry.
I'd probably open it. There's probably far more IT literate people on this call than myself. I'd probably never pass comment about whether it's Google or Amazon or others that are the most appropriate. Again, I'd come back to say, what are you trying to achieve? What you're trying to achieve, and then work out the best solution to do it. There's vulnerabilities with all networks in different ways. There's pros and cons. Nothing is completely secure.
Yeah, I guess Andrew might know, but depending on what they're actually achieving some of that stuff with in the use cases he's been talking about.
I'll just chip in. We're using, I'll put it in chat, but we're using NB-IoT. So Vodafone, and I think probably Kent's got coverage as well. I certainly know large parts of the Midlands have, and London has. I'll be honest, in the Northeast, we were doing our own LoRaWAN because coverage wasn't great. In London, we are just buying into the Vodafone solution. It is more efficient for us. We don't have any headaches. And, you know, politely, we just pay a cost and there's a service charge. And actually, we had a poor coverage area in one area, and Vodafone was just able to fix it, and it wasn't my problem. So we've gone down that route, and then we just use 4G sensors. The advantage for us is because we're above ground and doing a bit underground, it just works for us at NB-IoT, and I don't have the hassle. And I think that's probably true for many of you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Andrew. Any more for any more? Well, I'd just like to thank all our speakers today, Rob and Alasdair and James. I'd like to thank participation from all of you. Thanks very much, Andrew, and to Nick for sharing your experiences. Andrew, it's actually great that you're on and you're actually monitoring the data as we speak. I can imagine actually it's probably one of those things actually you can get quite obsessive about, watching the sort of potential changes and that sort of thing. Do you find it taking up a lot of your life? Do you find yourself sometimes work sort of, no?
Only because I run the program, okay? I want to make sure everything's working, and I do.
Yeah.
But I will, and I send religiously, I get in touch with my highways colleagues or my social care colleagues. I want to know they are using it and it's benefiting their lives.
Right, yeah.
For me, I just want to make sure I get as much out there as possible and it's working. What I do though, and it's funny because now we know about a couple of things that have happened, I actually ring up and go, can you just tell me, is X resident all right? If you me? So I still don't know who anyone is and where they happen to live, because I purposefully wanted to be, I'm away from all that stuff. Yeah. But I just want to know they're all right, if you see what I mean. So it's very interesting when you talk about this, because yes, you do see things and you kind of just have to go, I know about it, that's fine. Yeah. But I just want to follow up. And that's, I'm sure
you've invested in it, aren't you? Yeah. You're almost morally invested in it by nature of the project. Well, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. It's been really interesting to hear from you. So thanks very much for joining up. Hope there will be more of these, and I will come knocking on your door. Rest assured. Anyway, thank you everyone that's left. Thank you to all of you that have attended one or more of these sessions. I mean, I've found this one. I mean, they've all been interesting, but I have found this one especially interesting. It's I think the opportunities are potentially endless. And maybe there's an opportunity to look at maybe solving things like climate change and poverty and things like homelessness instead of just quit. I went to an MHCLG local digital declaration event where I met someone that had been working for 20 years in this space, mainly in the Northwest in councils, who using expletives said, are we still talking about filling in effing forms to get a parking permit? Why aren't we looking at transformation to solve homelessness and poverty, and I guess and then these other things maybe will just sort of follow on. But Internet of Things does seem to be that area that actually does start addressing the big issues. And yeah, I've found this really, really interesting. So I will end up at some point today or tomorrow getting everything published. The first 2 days are now published. I'll be sending out links to you all. Thank you for joining me on this this interesting journey this week. I think there will be another set of Government 4.0 activities probably in the next couple of months. Maybe start answering the questions that have been asked and building on some of the content that's already been shared. But thank you for sharing it with me. You're all wonderful, lovely people. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. It's the weekend. It's not beer o'clock for me, not just yet. But enjoy whatever you're doing this weekend, and I shall see you all virtually very soon. So just take care of yourself. And now I'm about to end the call. So take care, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks.